My name is Milton 510 Bowens. I'm a fine artist, and today we're in my studio and we're going to be talking about my newest collection, Gaming the Vote. One of the challenges of dealing with history as a subject matter is how can you continue to tell a story that most people have already heard, know, or some people have actually lived that story? For me, it's not actually that challenging. I always look for what is going to be a way to draw my audience in a way that they might not have been drawn in before. So when I see old photos and if I hear old music or watch old films, it all just becomes a part of the creative process. Two of my biggest inspirations are not even artists, people who inspire me with their work. Spike Lee and Ken Burns are two of my biggest influences. So I actually approach a lot of building my concepts for my collections based on filmmakers. So I storyboard everything. This one was a little different in terms of my approach because I didn't go to what people refer to as my go-to approach to art, which is mixed media and assemblage. A lot of people see my work and they think that that's like my primary approach to making work, but it's really not. I mean, outside of Spike Lee and Ken Burns, when we're talking about visual artists, Norman Rockwell, hands down, is my favorite artist. Because I was formally trained. I went to an all junior high and high school for art. So junior high school, I went to an art school. First year of college, went to an art school. I mean, I've been introduced to all of the artists, but the ones who have grabbed my attention the most are primarily the pop artists. When I'm looking at how they just took popular culture and put a creative twist to it, for some reason, that just excites me. So some stories, I look at what is going to be the most interesting way to excite the viewer. Then I start to think back about things in my childhood that I was excited about. And then for this particular collection, it just all worked because this body of work is really just talking about the history of voting. How did we get the vote? How people have tried to keep you from voting, the struggles that we've had to go through to exercise that right, and then how it comes under fire again. So we go from the 15th Amendment through 1965 Voting Rights Act to the Supreme Court ruling of 2013, now back to challenges that people faced before the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It's a never-ending cycle. So I thought this history really lended itself to competition. Some people look at suppressing your vote as a game. Like they take pleasure in beating you at not getting you to exercise your right. So I thought that was an ideal metaphor to create this collection based on classic vintage board games. Not video games, not cell phone app games, classic board games. Tribal competition. Gaming the vote. The vote, games, why are you playing with my right to vote?
I think the most profound thing about Milton's work is that Milton's work taught. It teaches. It teaches you about the history. It teaches you about the imperfections of our history as related to us as Black people. He's always made it a point to educate us and give us the information, literally direct us through his art, whether it was calling attention to us to study, whether it was calling attention to motivate and educate us, or calling attention to us to organize or mobilize. His work has always been profound in that way. And so it made me very proud and honored, when he approached me for the first time to be able to share his work here in the Brick House Gallery. My name is Barbara Range, and I am the director, curator, and owner of the Brick House Gallery, an art complex located in Sacramento in historic Oak Park, California. Milton's work speaks truth. I feel that strongly he's always maintained this authenticity and this, I would say, this message of him as an artist through his art, truth, and his ability to passionately create messages in his work that have always told truth. And for that reason, there was no way that you could absolutely deny the messages in Milton's work, no matter how strong they were. And truth sometimes is very strong to people, especially when the majority, of people are in denial about truth, or they're unlearned, or they have behaviors that they must unlearn in order to be able to truthfully and purposely see Milton's work.
One aspect of art that a lot of people never get a chance to see is, how does one get afforded the opportunity to make art? In my situation, being a studio artist, doing exhibitions, displaying, having gallery representation, a lot of people don't see the behind the scenes of what it takes to put a collection like this together. And this collection wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for the philanthropy of one of my avid supporters and probably one of my biggest supporters as an artist in general and friend, Warren Bonta. Artists throughout history have always needed philanthropy. They go hand in hand. I mean, this goes all the way back to the Renaissance era of arts. Da Vinci and Michelangelo and them cats, they didn't have part-time jobs. They had people who underwrote their creativity. Now, a lot of people might think that that's not significant because that part of the story very rarely gets told when we're talking about these guys. So when you look today in terms of certain artists and how we'll see certain artists get a huge amount of attention, or they'll get, these opportunities, and they might appear on mainstream magazine covers or show up on a television program. It's not just because they're extremely talented, a genius, or gifted. It's the philanthropy behind the scenes. It's their gallery representation. It's the people that gives them the ability to just be creative. It's the awards that they win. It's the grants that they receive. All of these things play a crucial role in an artist being able to just be creative. So for this particular situation, this collection wouldn't have even been possible had it not been for the personal philanthropy of Warren.
Enlightening, challenging, inspiring. These are terms that come to my mind when I think of Milton Bowen's work. Hello, I'm Warren Bonta, the sponsor of Milton's new collection of art called Gaming the Vote. I became aware of Milton and his work around 16 years ago. A piece would speak to me and I had to have it to savor and reflect on and to share. In the years since, I acquired a piece or two at a time until I had a collection large enough to share and discuss with others. With Milton's encouragement, I sponsored an exhibition of his work that I own at a local college just before the shutdown that resulted from the pandemic. Having some 30 pieces curated and arranged by professionals was quite an experience. I saw meanings and details in the work I hadn't seen before. Over time, I learned that Milton carefully researches his topics and plans the images and text of an entire collection before he begins to put paint on canvas. Milton studies and understands history, film, literature, sports, music, and many aspects of popular culture. He is well versed in the various schools of art, including the European Masters, American schools, and the Harlem Renaissance. He invokes references and makes connections other artists may not think of and presents them in engaging ways. Most of all, I think of Milton as a master storyteller. I'm constantly intrigued and inspired by his work. Milton is generous with his time and seems to enjoy a meeting of the minds. When he has the time to converse, in an exhibition space, a bookstore, or in his studio, be prepared to spend at least an hour with him. He will call on his extensive knowledge to riff on some fascinating topic, be it an art technique, an historical event, or the importance of the Battle of the Bastards in the Game of Thrones saga, a TV series with which he is intimately familiar. I've come to realize the importance of supporting an artist of Milton's stature and of helping him to reach a wider audience, both to enable him to continue to grow and to create, and to help make the world a better informed and more compassionate place. I hope you enjoy and appreciate this latest collection.
We went back and forth for a very long time over dealing with this particular subject matter. And there were times when we got close to execution, but the stars just were not in alignment. Now, I made a life decision, moved to Alabama. I'm in the state that's basically ground zero for change in terms of the civil rights movement for America and the world. And a portion of Warren's story is connected to that. So when I got here and started thinking about those conversations that we had, I became a little bit more intrigued. How do I tell this story? How can we tell this story? And not only just tell the story for Warren's benefit, but tell this story in a way that can help shed light for people who won't know who Warren is, who might not have ever been introduced to me, but the information that his philanthropy will allow me to communicate to the community might actually spark a new interest in activism today. So without his philanthropy, we don't get this opportunity. And I hope everybody that views this understands that we only get a few opportunities to impact change. And that's everybody. And this is one of those opportunities that I felt could impact change, and I want to take full advantage of it. And it wouldn't be possible without the philanthropy of Warren.
I believe most Americans see voting as one of their most important rights, as a way citizens can effectively participate in the governance of their city, state, and nation. It is how the will of the people is expressed as to who leaders will be and what laws will be enacted to guarantee effective government. In 1965, a time when the right to vote was being systematically denied to large numbers of Americans, I answered a call to participate in an effort to increase the number of people able to exercise that right. In Selma, Alabama, and surrounding areas, following the march from Selma to Montgomery, I and a few dozen other volunteers from various parts of our country engaged in an effort to assist local citizens to understand their right to vote and to attempt to register as voters. It was an effort that helped lead to the passage and implementation of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Unfortunately for me, that experience was cut short after a few weeks because of a family emergency. I have never forgotten the experience and have become concerned in recent years about the renewed curtailing and suppression of voting rights in American elections, leading to violations of the integrity of the vote and a resulting negative impact on the democratic process. Having become a collector of the work of Milton Bowens in recent years, I began to suggest to him that he create a collection of paintings about voting rights and voter suppression. Eventually, at the time Mr. Bowens moved to Alabama in 2019, a place with a unique role in the guarantee of the right to vote, I was pleased when he asked me if I would be interested in sponsoring a collection such as the one I had been proposing to him. As he outlined for me his concept of what the collection might look like, and as I considered the quality of his work and the impact it would likely have on the public's awareness of the importance of voting and of protecting its integrity, I agreed to sponsor the collection.
Gaming the Vote, Milton 510 Bowens. People have been playing board games in some form since the existence of ancient civilizations. Historians have been able to reconstruct many ancient games so scholars can play and study them today. Just like these games, politics can be traced back to these eras in history. Gaming the Vote, a collection of original mixed-media paintings, examines the competitive nature of politics, looking at the ramification of the 15th Amendment, the passing of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the landmark ruling by the Supreme Court in 2013. I choose to use the most popular board games as metaphors to address the history of the right to vote in America and those who seek to suppress that vote. Why does a sector of society view politics as a game? Ask yourself, why do games have the power to transform us from amicable adults to partisan competitors? And why are we so quick to forget that politics, unlike board games, have real-life repercussions? Board games are designed to rile us up. Like sports, these games work by creating division. We adopt a me versus them mentality. Now, when this attitude is applied towards politics, it can become very destructive and in some cases, dangerous. It creates win-at-all-cost scenarios that allows no room for compromise. By their nature, board games bring out our competitive spirit because they divide us. The fact that most board games involve some level of strategy, a win always, almost entails something we cannot control, a certain amount of luck. Similarities can be found in the political arena as well. We see polls that often predict outcomes that do not ever manifest, because political races are divided more times than not on simple voter turnout. So, like board games, the only way to control the outcome would be to cheat. That is the only surefire way a win is guaranteed. Today, we can see that our so-called founding fathers made a lot of mistakes when they drafted the United States Constitution. When it came to who could and who could not vote, that mistake was at the top of the list. It is not an overstatement to point out the price African Americans have paid fighting to correct this nation's oppressive framework, and in doing so, we find ourselves still paying the price for our step-forefathers' mistakes today. I do not know how we fix racism, which I believe is the most complex and embedded problem we all continue to face. But through studying art history, I have seen proof that art might be the most effective way of changing what people believe. Art in this sense is proven to be a powerful tool. It allows people from different cultures and different eras to communicate with each other via images, text, symbolism, and stories. Art throughout history has been used as a vehicle for social change. It can give voice to the politically or socially disenfranchised. This can be witnessed in the I am a man sign used during the Civil Rights Movement. These artistic tools can rouse emotions in those who encounter it, inspiring them to rally for change. I do not know for sure if changing someone's belief can be a manufactured act or a defined movement or just a series of organic societal events. But I do know art can be used to educate and not just decorate. My goal is simple: remind African Americans of the power of the vote, and to use my work to show them that many sacrifices were made for all of us to affirm that voting is a right, a very powerful right, and not just a privilege like some would lead you to believe.
The collection is Gaming the Vote. So when the average person hears that, you would think that it's self-explanatory. But a lot of people won't understand until they actually encounter the work what the collection is actually trying to communicate. Every piece in the collection is a metaphor for a moment in history. Something that happened that has contributed to this legacy of the importance of voting. Now, it's not a pure satirical approach. There are elements of satire in some of the pieces, but I'm really just playing on the metaphor of the title of the game and how does it connect to this moment in history. So the collection was built for two reasons: to pay tribute to activists who sacrificed their lives so we could all exercise our right to vote. Some people may not be familiar with the way the Constitution has actually impacted the lives of all people in America. It puzzled me that we are in 2020 and we're just getting to, in some circles, a discussion over the difference of independence and its definition for America. Just this year, major news outlets finally got into the discussion of Juneteenth. 2020. And we're just getting to the simple fact that Frederick Douglass wrote an essay in the 1800s talking about how the 4th of July didn't mean anything to a Negro. Now, some people may look at that and just say, this is history, why do we keep revisiting this history? But if we don't revisit it, then that means that we never can have honest conversations, start a process of healing, and move forward. So when you think about the Constitution and you think about the experience of the African American in this country, you have the 13th Amendment, which technically says African Americans are free, but it comes with an asterisk. Because the 13th Amendment says that if you get convicted of a crime, you can be returned to a state of slavery. Well, if white Americans had never been enslaved, how could they be returned to something that they had never previously been? So we know that asterisk has nothing to do with white America. It's specifically written for African Americans. Because if you're a white American and you've never been enslaved, how could they return you to a state of slavery when you've never been one? That's the 13th Amendment. So then we get to the 14th Amendment, that most NAACP attorneys used for the liberation of African Americans during the Civil Rights Movement, equal protection under the law, right? So that still doesn't give us total freedom until we get supposedly to the 15th Amendment, which gives us a part in the political process. It allows us to exercise our right to have a say in the democracy of America. That's the 15th Amendment. So now we have a 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment that takes from 1870 all the way to 1965 before it actually gets realized. And then from 1965 to 2013, we have this process of trying to build, quote unquote, trust and faith in a system, only to have our Supreme Court say, well, the issues that you dealt with during the Civil Rights era no longer exist. So we're going to roll back protections, opening the door for a whole new era of voter suppression that we are currently dealing with today. So when you start to look at this and you start to look at the titles of the collection, you have life. Well, in the painting Life, I'm paying tribute to the 4 martyrs here in Alabama who died during the Selma protest. Because people have to understand, individuals gave their life. They paid the ultimate price so everybody could exercise their right to vote. The game Risk, it specifically pays tribute to Jonathan Daniels, who was close friends with my collector, Warren Bonta, who is the philanthropist behind Gaming the Vote. It's a tribute to him and his sacrifice. He made the ultimate sacrifice. He had the right to vote, unencumbered. Well, nobody worried about him being able to vote, but that wasn't enough for him. He wanted to make sure everybody had the right to vote, and it cost him his life. That was a very costly risk. So then you look at monopoly and how over time, politicians want to create a monopoly on who can and who cannot vote. And then that becomes a strategy. So that leads you to Stratego. There's a strategy behind voter suppression. It's not an accident. And sometimes it becomes so blatant that the clues are right in front of you. That leads us to clue. So then, when you start to think about how these things add up, they play out in real time. Because Hillary Clinton in 2016 won the popular vote. She won the popular vote by over 3 million votes, but she didn't win the election. That's because the average person doesn't pay attention to how the Electoral College works. Hillary Clinton lost 3 key swing states that sunk her presidential campaign. 3 swing states. She couldn't carry them. She didn't win the presidency. See, when you start to think about how politics are attached to a system and how a system has similarities to competition, sports, games, it's very easy to make the connection of why I wanted to use games as the metaphor to help me tell this story. So, America's system is not broken. I hear a lot of people make the debate and argue and want to say, well, the system is broken. Politics is not broken. We have 3 branches of government. If people know how the 3 branches of government are supposed to operate, you start to understand that the system isn't broken. It's the people who we let into office that are actually the individuals that are broken. And that becomes a situation that, for lack of a better term, is kind of sorry. The system is sorry, but it's not broken. And it could easily be fixed based on the people who we actually give power to. So, when you start to go through and you got to look at the connections that these paintings are telling, every one of the paintings has train tracks in the painting. Because this is a journey. One painting leads you to the next painting. Then you're going to end up at the next painting. When you think about the individuals who in real time dealt with this, fought these fights, we just lost some of our elders who were key in this struggle. One of them particularly being Congressman John Lewis. We had a lot of tributes, at his passing. People were, paying tribute to John Lewis. There's even talk about renaming the Edmund Pettus Bridge in his honor. So as a tribute to him in this collection, and I concepted this collection before he passed. So one of the pieces in the collection that I had to turn into somewhat of a memorial to him after he passed was the game Trouble. Because one of the metaphors behind his career was he wasn't afraid to get into some good trouble. So it was an ideal play on the metaphor for the game Trouble and what John Lewis fought for. And when people look at John Lewis and Dr. Martin Luther King and Thurgood Marshall, any of these individuals that came out of the civil rights movement that had an impact on real change in America, what I think gets overshadowed today is people want to look at them as African-American activists. These were American activists. Their work changed everything for everybody. It didn't just change for Black people. It changed things for everybody. And we have allowed ourselves to fall into this tribal mentality that it's us against them. And the psychology of games forces you to take that position. What I want people to do is to look at these games and to see if they can get away from the psychology or the tactics that traditional games might bait you with, and just engage in dialogue. Just look at the paintings. See if there's something in here that you didn't know. See if there's a situation here that you might not have been aware of. See if you are aware of the sacrifices that people actually have made so you can exercise this right. If I could just get a few people to do that, then the collection is a success. Can art actually change the minds and hearts of people? I don't know. But I do know over time, and if you study art history, art probably gives us the best chance at generating change just because of the sheer nature of art has the potential to generate conversation and dialogue. And right now that's lacking. We are not talking to one another. People are not having respectful debate. Everything is an attack line. Everything is a dig. And we are not reaching across the aisle and having respectful debate. We can agree to disagree. James Baldwin has a very famous quote where he talks about, we don't have to agree, but when our disagreement infringes on my humanity, then I got a problem with that. And that's what I hope this collection does, is show everybody that the right to vote is not exclusive to one group of people or another group of people. It's not just conservative or liberal. It's everybody's right to vote. And that's the one thing that we all have that allows us to take part in democracy. And we should want more of it and not less of it. And we have to be held accountable for the people who we put into elected positions. And that's the beauty of this thing we call the American experience, that every 4 years we got a chance to course correct. We got a chance to get it right. We got a chance to do it over again. And some people feel that if they can keep some people from participating, then they can continue to control the outcome. When people figure out ways to keep you from exercising your right to vote, that's not democracy. And it's a design strategy. So when you're looking at Stratego, it's about a strategy. But one of the most strategic games of all the games, and some people might think that it's probably one of the oldest games, when actually it's not as old as people might think, but it is one of the most played games all over the planet, and that is chess. And I want people to think about this for a second. Checkers and chess are played on the same board. The board doesn't change for checkers or chess, but the games are dramatically different. So when we talk about politics today, you have very smart, intelligent people who are playing chess, but they are conveniently convincing their constituents and the American public that they're playing checkers. I would ask you to just pause, do some research, and try to actually determine, do you really understand the game that you're playing? You might be playing checkers, but your elected officials are playing chess. The one game in this entire collection that I want people to focus on, that I think is extremely relevant, is Scrabble. Scrabble is a word game. Politics is a word game. The first time I heard the phrase alternative fact made me think of Scrabble. I don't know if you've ever played Scrabble before, but you can get into a knockdown, drag-out fight with people trying to make up words. Well, politicians do it all the time. Politicians make up words, they make up new phrases, they make up all kind of things, and then they get the public to believe it. So, one of the things that has never really sat well with me is before Barack Obama became president, our current president, Donald Trump, actually forced the nation. He applied so much pressure that he forced the nation to make the first African-American president of the United States show his ID. Proof of birth. The media called this birtherism, which is a made-up word. What the media actually should have called it is what it actually was, not birtherism, racism. But when we start to make up words and new phrases, like birtherism, like alternative facts, we fall right back into the game of chess. You might be playing checkers, but they're actually playing chess. So as you look at each one of these paintings, these train tracks take you on a journey. Each one is connected in some form or fashion. In some way, every one of these paintings is tied to one basic metaphor. Voting is not a game. It is the one right you have to weigh in on this nation's democracy. You don't have to take it seriously, but you can best believe somebody else is taking it seriously because they're gaming the vote.